Breathing myth number 3 is that deep breathing is good for you. Now, this one really hinges on This myth really hinges on the interpretation of the word deep. Most people, when they're told to take a deep breath, interpret that as a big breath. And so they'll take a big breath, usually in through the mouth, out through the mouth, and will hyperventilate. Well, when we think about deep breathing, what we want to do is think deep as in deep down in the lungs, as happens with diaphragmatic breathing. So when we chest breathe, we take a shallow breath. And so if you take a big breath, it's going to happen up in the chest, as we've already talked about. But when we take a diaphragmatic breath, pull the air deep down into the lungs, that is going to have a calming effect. And so the next time you hear someone tell you to take a deep breath, remember to interpret that as diaphragmatic and not as big. There are 3 main benefits to diaphragmatic breathing that I want to talk about. The first is that we get better oxygen transfer. The top 10% of the lungs transfers oxygen at a rate of 6 milliliters per minute. The bottom 10% transfers oxygen at a rate of 40 milliliters per minute. So that means that the bottom 10% of the lungs is 7 times more efficient at transferring oxygen. So the deeper into our lungs that we breathe, the better the oxygen transfer. So simply by fully engaging the diaphragm, we're going to pull that air deeper and we're going to get that increased oxygen transfer. We're also going to get better toxin elimination. The diaphragm is the primary pump for 60% of the lymph nodes of your body. The cardiovascular system has the heart that pumps the blood, but the lymphatic system does not have a pump, and it's actually pumped by movement. So when we walk or when we move our arms, it moves the lymph along. But the diaphragm pumps a huge percentage of the lymphatic system. And so simply by breathing with the diaphragm, we can increase toxin elimination 15-fold by getting the lymph flowing better. Diaphragmatic breathing also activates the relaxation response. We have autonomic chemoreceptors in our lungs. The autonomic nervous system contains the sympathetic or fight or flight nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest nervous system, or the relaxation nervous system. And inside of our lungs, we have these chemoreceptors that monitor the air. And when we breathe deep down into the lungs, these chemoreceptors send signals to our brain that everything's okay, that we're safe, and that we can relax. However, when we breathe up high in our lungs, these chemoreceptors send signals to our brain that there's a threat present, and it activates our fight or flight response. So simply by breathing with our upper chest and keeping the air up high, we send signals to our brain that there's danger, that we need to be alert, and we need to have this fight or flight activated. And so one of the best ways to relax is to just ensure that we're breathing diaphragmatically deep down into our lungs so that we can get that relaxation response. Now, this is probably something you've noticed before if you've been, say, driving on the freeway and had to slam on your brakes, and you immediately start breathing with the chest as part of that stress response. And in this case, it's important to just remind yourself very quickly, okay, I need to breathe with my diaphragm. I need to pull that breathing back deep into the lungs and send those signals to my brain that everything's okay. Truth number 3, to debunk myth number 3, is that diaphragmatic breathing is good for you. So the next time you hear the phrase deep breathing, remember to think deep into the lungs, diaphragmatic.